Dominic Moretti no estaba dormido. La Glock bajo su muslo estaba completamente cargada y su dedo descansaba a 7,5 centímetros del gatillo. Este era un juego que practicaba una vez al mes. Cerrar los ojos, esperar, ver cuál de ellos se rompía primero. Fuera de los altos ventanales del estudio de la mansión Moretti, la lluvia caía a cántaros, golpeando los vitrales como una banda de tambores que se negaba a terminar. Long Island. A finales de octubre podía hacer eso, convertir el cielo en un moretón que duraba 3 días. Dentro, el estudio estaba en penumbra, iluminado solo por el tenue resplandor de una única lámpara de banquero verde y el rojo pulsante de los leños que se derrumbaban en la chimenea. Las paredes estaban revestidas de roble oscuro. La alfombra era una persa del siglo XIX, por la que su padre había pagado más de lo que la mayoría de los hombres pagaban por una casa. Cada objeto en esta habitación estaba elegido. Cada centímetro era un mensé. Sobre el escritorio de caoba junto a su silla, Dominic había dispuesto el cebo como un hombre que tiende una trampa para un lobo. Un fajo de $20,000 en billetes de 100, con las bandas aún intactas, colocado de forma que el borde sobresaliera ligeramente del escritorio, como si lo hubieran dejado allí y olvidado. Junto a él, bañado por la luz de una lámpara, un Patek Philippe Nautilus de oro rosa, valorado en $80,000 en el mercado secundario, o incluso más si el comprador no hacía preguntas. 2 tipos de cebo: dinero en efectivo para los desesperados, un reloj para los astutos, para aquellos que creían poder empeñar algo que nadie echaría de menos. Dominic había aprendido hacía años que la gente revelaba su verdadera naturaleza no por lo primero que cogía, sino por lo segundo. Estaba hundido en el sillón de cuero burdeos, con los hombros relajados y la cabeza ligeramente ladeada, como si fuera un anciano dormitando después de comer. Su respiración era lenta y pausada, un acto que había perfeccionado. Tenía 37 años, una mandíbula que podía cortar papel y una cicatriz en la sien izquierda de un bar de Palermo cuando tenía 19. No parecía un hombre que durmiera plácidamente. Ese era, por supuesto, el objetivo. En su cabeza, el guión ya estaba escrito. Alguien entraría. Alguien vería el dinero. Alguien miraría sus ojos cerrados, el subir y bajar de su pecho, y decidiría que nunca lo sabría, y llegaría. Siempre llegaban porque Dominic Moretti creía, con la certeza de un hombre que había enterrado su propia prueba, que todo ser humano tenía un precio. El único misterio era el número. La bisagra de latón de la puerta del estudio se abrió con un susurro. «¡Pasos!», se aclara la garganta. 2 pares. Un adulto vacilante, cuidadoso, las suelas de goma de un zapato de limpieza. Y otro par, más ligero, más pequeño, arrastrando los pies justo detrás. Un niño. Un susurro apresurado, apenas audible por encima de la lluvia. «Siéntate aquí, Ethan. No toques nada. No hagas ruido». La puerta se cerró con un clic. Silencio. Solo la lluvia y el reloj de pie en la esquina. Tic, tac, tic, tac. Dominic esperó. Siempre esperaba. Entonces, algo que no había planeado. Una manita, cálida y temblorosa, se posó suavemente sobre el dorso de la suya. Y una voz, suave como un susurro, más cerca de su oído que nadie en los últimos 3 años. «Señor, ¿le duele el pecho?» Dominic Moretti, un hombre que había matado sin pestañear, que había visto a un primo desangrarse en un muelle del Bronx, y había terminado su cigarrillo antes de llamar a nadie, se quedó rígido en la silla. En 37 años de vida, nadie le había hecho jamás esa pregunta. Ni su madre, ni sus hombres, ni siquiera Sofía. La manita se detuvo un instante, luego se apartó. Oyó al niño sentarse en el borde de la alfombra cerca de sus pies, y entonces un susurro, que no iba dirigido a él, ni a nadie, se elevó a través de la luz del fuego. Mi padre solía respirar así antes de irse. 30 minutos antes, la misma habitación había estado sumida en un silencio muy diferente. Dominic Moretti estaba de pie junto a la ventana alta, con una mano en el bolsillo de sus pantalones de carbón, la otra sosteniendo un vaso pequeño de amaro siciliano que aún no había probado. Observó cómo la lluvia se tragaba el largo camino de grava de la finca. 22 acres en la costa norte de Long Island, con una verja de hierro en la carretera, un muro de piedra a lo largo del perímetro, cámaras de seguridad en todos los ángulos imaginables y 2 que no necesitaba explicar. Todo era suyo, todo construido por las manos de un hombre muerto y mantenido en pie por las suyas. El apellido Moretti había estado ligado a Brooklyn durante 60 años. Su padre, Salvatore, que no debe confundirse con el Camden que compartía el nombre, y nada del honor, había comenzado con un simple club social italiano en Henry Street, y murió silenciosamente a los 71 años con 3 restaurantes, una constructora, una participación en el mercado de pescado de Fulton, y un segundo libro de contabilidad del que nadie hablaba en voz alta. Cuando el corazón del anciano finalmente falló, Dominic tenía 30 años, estaba comprometido con la hija de un florista de Bensonhurst, y no estaba preparado para la rapidez con la que la habitación podía volverse en tu contra una vez que la silla a la cabecera quedaba vacía. Él había ocupado la silla. La había conservado durante 7 años. Sobre el papel, era restaurador, con 4 locales, servicio de catering para eventos, una constructora mediana que había ganado una cantidad sorprendente de contratos municipales. En el otro libro de contabilidad, figuraban envíos de licor que llegaban en cajas etiquetadas como aceite de oliva, rutas de protección a través de Red Hook y Canarsie, y un acuerdo secreto con 2 sindicatos que lo habían hecho muy rico y muy odiado. 3 heridas habían moldeado al hombre en que se había convertido. La primera fue Sofía, hace 3 años, en una gris mañana de abril. Iba conduciendo ella misma al obstetra para una revisión de 4 meses. 4 meses de un hijo que habían estado intentando tener desde la boda. Una camioneta negra la embistió de costado en la intersección de Flatbush y Caton. El conductor se dio a la fuga. Las placas eran robadas. El reclamo del seguro fue limpio, pero Dominic sabía, como un hombre sabe el peso de su propia mano, que el vehículo había salido de un taller mecánico de Red Hook, propiedad de Salvatore Camden. No tenía pruebas que lo respaldaran, solo la verdad. El segundo era Vincent, su primo, su subjefe, el padrino de un niño que ya no existía. 2 años atrás, Vincent se había transferido $2 millones de una cuenta de ahorros y había desaparecido en Costa Rica. La nota que dejó en el escritorio de Dominic decía simplemente: «Lo siento, primo, estoy cansado». El tercero era Arthur Goldberg, su abogado durante 9 años, quien había estado colaborando con el FBI casi todo el año anterior. Dominic se enteró en septiembre. Arthur, desde octubre, ya no ejerce la abogacía en ningún sitio. De esas 3 heridas, una sola conclusión se había cristalizado en él, como el hielo que se forma en una ventana. Toda persona tiene un precio. La única pregunta es el número. Había empezado el juego 18 meses atrás. Una simple prueba. Dejar algo valioso. Fingir que dormía. Ver quién llegaba. En 2 años, había despedido a 7 empleadas domésticas. Todas habían tocado el dinero. No las había despedido con ira. Las había despedido con algo peor. Alivio. Cada robo era una prueba. Cada robo confirmaba que el mundo era tan oscuro como él lo había imaginado. El tema de hoy era Clara Bennett, contratada por Rosa hacía 2 semanas. Viuda. Un hijo. Desesperada en teoría, que era la única que valía la pena comprobar. Había dejado el dinero en efectivo sobre el escritorio. Había puesto el reloj en marcha. Se había sentado en la silla. Había cerrado los ojos. No le habían dicho, porque no había preguntado, que la mujer que había entrado por la puerta ese día no entraría sola. Clara Bennett tenía 28 años y a las 2 de la madrugada estaba despierta en la mesa de la cocina sumando números que se negaban a obedecer. El apartamento era un 3er piso sin ascensor en Bay Ridge, de 2 habitaciones, si se era generoso, con un radiador que hacía tic-tac toda la noche y una ventana que daba a la parte trasera de la ventana de otro edificio. La mesa frente a ella no era realmente una mesa. Era un trozo de madera maciza sobre 2 archivadores que su marido había traído de una venta de almacén el año anterior a enfermar. Nunca la había reemplazado. No sabía por qué. Frente a ella, extendidas como una mano de cartas con la que no podía ganar, estaban las facturas. $340,000. Ese era el saldo final de la cuenta del hospital de David. 14 meses antes, había fallecido en una habitación del 3er piso del Sloan Kettering, con un tubo de plástico pegado a la mandíbula y el anillo de bodas ya suelto en el dedo. Cáncer de páncreas. Etapa 4 cuando el médico pronunció la palabra en voz alta. El seguro había pagado lo que tenía que pagar. El resto era suyo, acumulando intereses a un porcentaje que había dejado de leer, porque leerlo le provocaba un fuerte dolor de pecho. Debajo de esa cifra, había otra más pequeña y cruel. $1,200 al mes. La digoxina de Ethan. Su seguimiento se aclara la garganta. Cardiología. El cardiólogo pediátrico de la NUY que lo había atendido desde la reparación de la comunicación interventricular a los 5 años, y que no aceptaba su seguro. Había dejado de comprar carne hacía 3 meses. No se lo había contado a nadie. El trabajo en Moretti pagaba $45 la hora. Casi se echó a reír al leer la carta de oferta. En Nueva York, nadie pagaba a una empleada doméstica $45 la hora, a menos que quisieran algo que ella desconociera. Pero Rosa, la anciana que la había entrevistado en la cocina de la mansión, la miró a los ojos y le dijo: «El señor Moretti paga lo que paga porque quiere gente que no tenga a dónde ir. Eso es todo. Tú haces tu trabajo. No haces preguntas. No tocas nada». Clara firmó. A las 6 de la mañana, su teléfono vibró con una alerta de la NOEA. Temporal costero. Escuelas de Long Island cerradas. Su niñera, una vecina llamada Renata, la llamó 20 minutos después. «No puedo, Clara. Lo siento. El vuelo de mi madre se quedó atascado. Tengo a los pequeños». Clara llamó a 2 números más. Ninguno contestó. A las 7:30, estaba de pie bajo la lluvia frente a la puerta de Moretti, con la mano de su hijo en la izquierda y un sabor a pavor en la boca. Rosa la recibió en la entrada de servicio y cerró los ojos por un largo segundo al ver al niño. Clara, solo por hoy, Rosa. Por favor. Se sentará. Sabe sentarse. Rosa tenía 68 años, canas en las sienes, un rostro como una moneda antigua. Exhaló por la nariz como lo hacen las mujeres que han vivido mucho. Al señor Moretti no le gustan los niños, no desde la señora Sofía. Si ve al niño, no puedo protegerte. ¿Me entiendes, hija? Entiendo. Rosa se persignó. El estudio tiene que estar listo esta mañana. Duerme la siesta allí los domingos. Llévate al niño. Entra y sal rápido. Que Dios nos ayude a las dos. Clara condujo a Ethan por el largo pasillo hacia el ala oeste. La casa olía a cedro y a dinero antiguo. Los retratos en las paredes los observaban pasar. A mitad del pasillo, justo antes de la curva hacia el estudio, se detuvo. Un hombre estaba de pie junto a la ventana del fondo, de espaldas a ella, con el teléfono pegado a la oreja, de hombros anchos, traje oscuro, un anillo dorado en el dedo meñique que reflejaba la luz gris. Marco Russo. Conocía el nombre porque Rosa le había advertido sobre él, la mano derecha del señor Moretti. No hables a menos que él hable primero. Hablaba en voz baja. Aún así, lo oyó. Sí, está solo en el estudio. La nueva criada está con él. Te mantendré informado, señor C. Una pausa. Luego más bajo. No te preocupes. No me oirá. La llamada se cortó. Marco giró la cabeza apenas 1 centímetro, lo suficiente para saber que había alguien allí, y Clara apretó la mano de Ethan y siguió caminando como si no hubiera oído nada. Como si el frío que le recorría la espalda fuera solo el clima. No entendía lo que había oído. Sabía, como sabe una mujer que ha enterrado a su marido, que era algo que no debería haber oído. La puerta del estudio se cerró tras ellos con un suave y elegante clic. Clara apoyó la espalda contra ella medio segundo más de lo que pretendía, lo justo para apartar el sonido de la voz de Marco de su cabeza y recuperar su expresión maternal. Luego dejó el cubo de la limpieza sin hacer ruido y se arrodilló frente a su hijo sobre la gruesa alfombra persa. Ethan tenía 7 años, pequeño para su edad, vestido con los pantalones de pana que ella había remendado a la altura de la rodilla hacía 2 noches, y una sudadera gris que había sido la favorita de su padre, hasta que éste encogió demasiado como para usarla. Su cabello castaño estaba húmedo en las puntas por la lluvia. Sus ojos eran oscuros, pacientes, con una madurez que hacía que los ojos de un niño de 7 años no la miraran sin pestañear. Lo tomó por los hombros. Su voz salió más temblorosa de lo que quería. Ethan, escucha a mamá. Escúchame, cariño. Te estoy escuchando. El jefe está durmiendo en esa silla de allí. ¿Lo ves? Ethan ladeó la cabeza para mirar más allá de ella, al otro lado de la larga habitación, en el sillón burdeos orientado hacia el fuego. Un hombre estaba sentado de espaldas a la puerta, con la cabeza ligeramente inclinada y una mano apoyada en el reposabrazos. Ethan pudo ver la manga oscura de una chaqueta, un pesado reloj de oro en la muñeca, el lento subir y bajar de un hombro. Lo veo, dijo Ethan. Es un hombre muy poderoso y muy peligroso. No lo molestes. No toques nada en esta habitación, ni el globo terráqueo, ni los libros, ni el escritorio, nada. ¿Entiendes? Sí, mami. Siéntate aquí, en esta esquina de la alfombra. No te muevas, no hagas ruido. Si necesitas ir al baño, aguanta hasta que vuelva por ti. ¿Puedes hacerlo? Sí. Tragó saliva. La siguiente parte fue más difícil, y se odió a sí misma por decírselo a una niña, pero lo dijo porque era la verdad. Cariño, si se despierta y te ve aquí, perderemos el trabajo. Perderemos el apartamento. No podremos pagar tu medicina para el corazón. ¿Entiendes lo que eso significa? El pequeño rostro de Ethan hizo algo sutil. No miedo, no lágrimas. Algo más parecido a la mirada que había tenido antes de la operación, cuando el anestesiólogo le explicó la mascarilla. Una concentración. Una tranquilidad. Entiendo, mami. Clara apretó sus labios con fuerza contra su frente. Aspiró el aroma del champú. La lluvia. El cálido olor a niño que desprendía. Y luego se levantó antes de poder llorar. Tomó el cubo. Abrió la puerta con cuidado. Revisó el pasillo y salió sigilosamente. El pestillo hizo clic. Ethan estaba solo con el hombre dormido. No lloró. No intentó abrir la puerta. Se sentó exactamente donde su madre lo había colocado, con las rodillas pegadas a la barbilla, y miró. El estudio era la habitación más grande en la que jamás había estado. El techo era tan alto como el de una iglesia. Un globo terráqueo de madera pulida color miel se alzaba en una esquina sobre un soporte de latón. Sobre la chimenea colgaba un cuadro de una montaña gris con nieve en la cima y un pequeño pájaro negro a medio camino del cielo. El escritorio en el centro de la habitación era del tamaño de un pequeño barco. Sobre el escritorio, dos objetos reflejaban la luz de la lámpara de una manera que hizo que la mirada de Ethan se detuviera. Un fajo de billetes sujeto por una gruesa banda de papel y un reloj, dorado y pesado, que yacía plano como si estuviera descansando. Ethan los miró durante 2 segundos completos. Luego apartó la vista. Mamá le había dicho que no tocara nada, y Ethan era un niño que hacía lo que su madre le decía, porque su madre estaba cansada. Su madre estaba triste, y él no quería ser un motivo más. Ella lloraba por las noches cuando creía que él dormía. Sus ojos se desviaron hacia la estantería, lomos de cuero, letras doradas que no podía leer, y en el estante del medio, enmarcada en plata, una fotografía. Una mujer joven, con rizos oscuros que le caían sobre los hombros, riendo de algo fuera del marco. Llevaba un vestido amarillo de verano. Parecía el tipo de persona a la que le habría gustado Ethan. Ethan la miró fijamente durante un buen rato, y luego, poco a poco, la figura en el sillón comenzó a llamar su atención. Al principio no era nada, solo un hombre durmiendo, pero Ethan había pasado 3 semanas en una UCI pediátrica cuando tenía 5 años. Había pasado noches en vela, escuchando la respiración de hombres, mujeres y niños en las otras camas. Sabía cómo sonaba el sueño. Sabía cómo sonaba la falta de sueño. La respiración de este hombre tenía un ritmo irregular, superficial. Luego se contenía y luego se liberaba demasiado rápido. Su hombro, bajo la chaqueta oscura, tembló levemente y se quedó inmóvil. La mano en el reposabrazos no estaba relajada. Era una mano fingiendo. Ethan observó durante un buen rato, con la barbilla aún apoyada en las rodillas. No está bien, pensó el niño. Algo le duele. La mayoría de los niños de la edad de Ethan habrían tenido miedo del hombre en la silla. Ethan no era como la mayoría de los niños. Hace 2 años, cuando tenía 5 años, le diagnosticaron una comunicación interventricular, un orificio entre las 2 cavidades inferiores del corazón. Una palabra que su madre no pudo pronunciar sin llorar durante el primer mes. Un agujero en su hijo. El cardiólogo lo dibujó en una libreta con bolígrafo verde para que David y Clara pudieran ver por dónde se iba el oxígeno, que no debía ir allí. Una semana después, llevaron a Ethan en silla de ruedas a través de un par de puertas de acero a un quirófano en el Hospital Mount Sinai. y cuando despertó 3 días después, estaba en la UCI pediátrica con una vía en el cuello y un dinosaurio de peluche que una enfermera le había colocado bajo el brazo mientras aún dormía. Estuvo en esa unidad durante 3 semanas. Recordaba las baldosas del techo. Había 48 en el patrón sobre su cama. Las había contado una y otra vez las noches en que el monitor pitaba y el efecto de la medicación para el dolor empezaba a desaparecer. Y su padre, David, se sentaba en la silla de vinilo junto a la cama, sujetándole la mano con tanta fuerza que Ethan podía sentir los latidos del corazón de David entre los dedos. En la habitación contigua, separada por una delgada cortina verde, había un anciano de 80 años, tal vez más, con una voz que sonaba como grava en una lata de café. El anciano les gritaba a las enfermeras todo el día y toda la noche. Gritaba cuando le tomaban las constantes vitales. Gritaba cuando le traían la comida. Gritaba cuando apagaban la luz. Una noche, Ethan le susurró a su padre: «Papá, ese hombre da miedo». David se inclinó, rozando la oreja de Ethan con sus bigotes, y le susurró: «No da miedo, hijo. Está sufriendo. La gente que sufre es la que más grita. Cuando ves a alguien siendo malo, lo primero que debes preguntarte es: ¿está sufriendo?». Casi siempre, la respuesta es: sí. Ethan pensó en eso durante mucho tiempo. En la 3ª semana, cuando le dieron el alta, su padre lo tomó de la mano y lo acompañó hasta la habitación contigua. El anciano había estado despierto, solo, más pequeño de lo que Ethan lo recordaba. David había dicho: «Mi hijo quería despedirse, señor». El amán anciano había mirado a Ethan durante un largo instante, y luego había extendido una mano temblorosa y manchada, y había tomado la pequeña mano de Ethan, y había comenzado a llorar. Sin palabras, solo llanto. Ethan había sostenido su mano hasta que una enfermera entró con una bandeja. No había tenido miedo. David había vivido 8 meses más. Páncreas. Rápido. El tipo de rapidez que no le da tiempo a una familia para acostumbrarse a nada. La última noche, en una cama de hospital instalada en la sala de estar de su apartamento porque David había pedido volver a casa, había abrazado a Ethan con la poca fuerza que le quedaba. Había presionado su boca contra el cabello de Ethan y le había susurrado una última cosa: «No tengas miedo de la gente porque son grandes, amigo. Ten miedo porque están sufriendo y nadie les ha preguntado. ¿De acuerdo? Prométemelo». «Lo prometo, papá». Así que cuando Ethan, 2 años después, se sentó en una alfombra persa en el despacho de un jefe de la mafia y observó a un hombre fingir dormir, no vio un monstruo. Vio el temblor del hombro. Vio el ritmo irregular de la respiración. Vio los nudillos de una mano que se esforzaba demasiado por parecer relajada. Daba miedo un respirador. Daba miedo el resplandor azul blanquecino de una luz de quirófano. Daba miedo el sonido que su padre había emitido al final, cuando el sonido ya no era una palabra. Ethan había mirado esas cosas a la cara. Un hombre en una silla no era una de ellas. El chico se desenroscó de la alfombra. Se puso de pie sin hacer ruido, sin el sonido que había aprendido en esas largas noches en la UCI. Cómo se movían las enfermeras cuando no querían despertarte. Y cruzó el despacho por un camino que hacía que sus pequeñas zapatillas de tenis tocaran las partes más silenciosas de la alfombra. No se dirigió al escritorio. No miró el dinero. No miró el reloj. Se dirigió al sillón. Se detuvo junto a ella, a la altura del reposabrazos, lo que hizo que su rostro quedara a la altura del hombro del hombre sentado en él. Observó la mano que descansaba sobre el cuero, ancha, marcada por cicatrices en 2 nudillos. El reloj de oro suelto en una muñeca, que alguna vez había sido más gruesa. Notó que los dedos no estaban completamente relajados. Se mantenían inmóviles. Extendió la mano y posó su pequeña y cálida mano en el dorso de aquella. «Señor», susurró, «¿le duele el pecho?» Y en la silla, con los ojos cerrados, Dominic Moretti, que no se había inmutado la noche en que murió su padre, que no se había inmutado ante el ataúd cerrado de su esposa, que no se había inmutado en 3 largos años, sintió que algo que se había enfriado bajo sus costillas se movía levemente, involuntariamente, como un músculo que había olvidado que poseía, como un animal que creía muerto que giraba la cabeza una sola vez en la oscuridad. Dominic no respondió. El juego, se dijo a sí mismo. Seguía siendo el juego. Había estado esperando el alcance. Seguía esperando. La mano se había separado de la suya. El chico seguía allí. Podía sentir la pequeña figura de pie junto al sillón. Podía oler la lluvia y el tenue y limpio almidón de una sudadera lavada demasiadas veces. Mantuvo los ojos cerrados. Mantuvo la respiración lenta. En su cabeza, una voz más fría susurró lo que un hombre más frío necesitaba oír. La madre lo instruyó. Este es el nuevo truco. Compasión en lugar de hurto. Otra mano, el mismo bolsillo. Espera. Así que esperó. Ethan también esperó. Por un momento como si hubiera esperado una respuesta y estuviera dispuesto a dejar que el silencio se prolongara. Entonces, la pequeña figura se movió. Dominic oyó el suave roce de las zapatillas en la alfombra, alejándose de la silla, no hacia el escritorio, al otro lado de la habitación. Arriesgó una visión entrecerrada, lo suficiente para ver. El chico estaba en el sofá contra la pared del fondo, donde Rosa guardaba una manta de lana de cordero, doblada del color de la avena. Estaba intentando levantarla. Era una manta pesada, más grande que él. Agarró la esquina superior con ambos puños y tiró. Y la cosa se desplegó y se arrastró a medias por la alfombra detrás de él, mientras la llevaba de vuelta por la habitación. Despacio y con cuidado, como un niño que lleva a un gato dormido. Dominic cerró el ojo. Sintió el peso de la manta posarse sobre sus piernas. Unas manitas pequeñas la alisaron por los bordes para que no se resbalara. El niño metió la esquina bajo el brazo de la silla con concentración, como Dominic había visto meter la esquina de una sábana, y por un instante traicionero, la garganta de Dominic intentó hacer algo que no había hecho en 3 años. El niño retrocedió. Un susurro, no para él, para nadie, como un niño que se narra a sí mismo cuando está haciendo algo importante. Mamá dice que cuando la gente sufre hay que mantenerla caliente. Papá también tuvo frío. Antes, Dominic abrió un ojo una fracción de milímetro, protegido por sus pestañas. Vio la parte superior de una cabeza castaña, cabello húmedo por la lluvia que no se había cortado bien en mucho tiempo, un cuello demasiado delgado para el cuello de la sudadera. Cerró el ojo de nuevo y volvió a apretar la mandíbula. «Ahora», dijo la voz fría en su interior, «ahora va al escritorio». El niño fue al escritorio. El pulso de Dominic se aceleró un poco, luego Podía seguir los pequeños pasos solo por el sonido. Los oyó detenerse exactamente donde sabía que se detendrían, en la esquina de la caoba, donde el ladrillo de cientos colgaba medio fuera del borde, un insulto de descuido que prácticamente gritaba: «¡Llévame!». Esperó el crujido del papel. El crujido no llegó. En cambio, oyó el sonido silencioso, casi burocrático, de algo que se movía. Una pequeña palma deslizando cuidadosamente un papel 2 centímetros hacia atrás. Sobre la seguridad del escritorio, un niño ordenando. Luego, una pausa. Dominic podía imaginar al niño mirando el reloj, $80,000 de oro rosa frío, brillando a la luz de la lámpara. El tipo de objeto diseñado para atraer la mirada humana, como una ventana atrae a una polilla. Esperó a que lo recogiera. Esperó a que la pequeña mano lo rodeara. No, el niño solo miró. Dominic podía oírlo respirar suavemente, con una respiración ligeramente irregular. La respiración de un niño que se había entrenado para no jadear. Luego, un crujido de tela, un bolsillo, algo pequeño que sacaban. Ethan lo colocó sobre el escritorio junto al Patek, con el cuidado deliberado de un niño que coloca una hostia de comunión, un frasco de pastillas de plástico naranja, la etiqueta de la farmacia, la dosis pediátrica, una receta con el nombre de un niño de 7 años. Dominic, ahora a través de la rendija más fina de un ojo, lo vio. Un medicamento para el corazón de un niño junto a un reloj de $80,000 que no necesitaba, y $20,000 en efectivo que nunca había ganado. Ethan susurró al respaldo del sillón, apenas lo suficientemente alto como para oírse al otro lado de la habitación. «Señor, si le duele el pecho, puede tomar uno. Solo uno. Mi mamá me los da cuando no puedo respirar bien. Puede tomar los prestados». Dejó el frasco allí, no escondido, no medio escondido, a la vista, ofrecido. En el sillón, Dominic Moretti abrió lentamente un ojo por completo. Miró el pequeño frasco naranja sobre el escritorio. Miró el reloj que estaba a su lado, de oro rosa, impecable, que valía más que el sueldo anual de un médico. Observó la etiqueta de la farmacia desde el ángulo que le daba la lámpara, lo justo para leer una palabra. Digoxina. Sintió un nudo en la garganta y durante un largo segundo no pudo recordar cómo se suponía que funcionaba el aire. Ethan regresó a su rincón de la alfombra por el mismo camino silencioso por el que había venido. Se sentó, se llevó las rodillas al pecho y las abrazó con sus delgados brazos. Solo entonces empezó a temblar. No llevaba abrigo. La sudadera, la vieja de su padre, antes gris, ahora del color de las palomas, era fina en los codos y aún más en los puños. Sus pequeños vaqueros estaban húmedos por el paseo bajo la lluvia. Sin la manta del sofá, no tenía nada que lo protegiera del aire frío que se colaba por las altas ventanas del estudio. Escondió la barbilla en el cuello de la camisa, como hacía las noches en que fallaba el radiador del apartamento, y esperó a su madre. Al otro lado de la habitación, medio oculto tras sus propias pestañas, Dominic Moretti observó al niño temblar y no se fiaba de lo que veía. La puerta se abrió. Clara entró con pasos rápidos y silenciosos, el cubo de la limpieza golpeando contra su rodilla. Una disculpa ya a medio formar en sus labios, sin que nadie en particular la viera. Había estado a 2 habitaciones de distancia cuando su cerebro la alcanzó y le recordó que se le había olvidado decirle a Ethan dónde estaba el baño. La casa era enorme. El niño tenía 7 años. Si se alejaba, se detenía a 1 metro de la puerta. Sus ojos hicieron lo que hace el pánico. Fueron en un orden rápido y terrible. La manta de lana de cordero que Rosa le había dicho, el nombre de esa manta, que decía $3,000. Niño, ni siquiera respires cerca de ella. Estaba extendida sobre las piernas de Dominic Moretti, como una manta doméstica sobre un tío dormido. sobre el escritorio de caoba, junto a un reloj de oro rosa que le habían dicho que nunca desempolvara, había un pequeño frasco de medicamentos de color naranja inconfundible que habría reconocido en la oscuridad. En la esquina de la alfombra, su hijo estaba acurrucado sin abrigo, temblando. La sangre se le fue de la cara como el agua de un desagüe. Todo lo que había temido desde el momento en que escuchó la alerta de Noah se reorganizó en una sola forma, la forma de la llave del apartamento que le quitarían al final del día. Sus piernas la llevaron hasta Ethan antes de que decidiera moverse. Cayó de rodillas sobre la alfombra con tanta fuerza que sus rótulas se amoratarían por la noche. «Ethan, cariño, ¿qué hiciste?» Su voz no sonaba como la suya. «¿Por qué está tu medicina en el escritorio? Te lo dije. Te dije, cariño, que no tocaras nada. ¿Por qué está en el escritorio?» Ethan la miró. Sus ojos eran enormes y claros. No había culpa en ellos, lo que la asustó más que la culpa misma. «Mamá», susurró. Le dolía el pecho. Solo quería ayudar. Clara cerró los ojos por un segundo. 1. Luego, se puso de pie. Cruzó la alfombra en 3 zancadas. Agarró la botella naranja del escritorio con una mano que temblaba tanto que casi tiró la lámpara. La acunó contra su pecho como si fuera un pajarito. Se giró. Miró al hombre en el sillón, con la cabeza aún ligeramente inclinada hacia adelante, los ojos aún cerrados, aparentemente todavía dormido. Caminó hacia un lado de su silla. Volvió a arrodillarse, porque lo único que su cuerpo recordaba hacer era arrodillarse. «Señor Moretti», susurró para que el niño no la oyera. «Señor, por favor, no me despida por esto. No tenía malas intenciones. Tiene 7 años. No sabe lo que son las cosas. Pagaré por cualquier cosa que haya tocado. Trabajaré». No pudo terminar. Dominic abrió los ojos. No un sobresalto, no un rugido, no el ladrido frío para el que había estado preparando todo su sistema nervioso. Él simplemente los abrió, lentamente, como un hombre abre los ojos bajo el agua, y no la miró a ella, ni siquiera a su rostro, sino a la pequeña botella naranja presionada contra su pecho. La miró durante un largo segundo. Luego, con una voz que no coincidía con la del hombre del que la casa le había advertido, una voz que salió ronca, quebrada por los bordes como algo que se ha dejado demasiado tiempo en un cajón, dijo: «Dáselo, Clara. Deja que tome su medicina. Tiene frío. Se aclara la garganta». Clara lo miró fijamente. No se movió. No entendió. Las palabras llegaron por el aire, con suficiente claridad. «Dáselo. Deja que lo tome. Tiene frío». Pero no se relacionaban con ninguna versión de este momento para la que se había preparado. Se había preparado para: «Sal de mi casa». Se había preparado para: «Voy a llamar a alguien». No se había preparado para la ternura, y no sabía, arrodillada en la alfombra junto al sillón de un hombre al que le habían dicho que temiera, qué hacer con lo que estaba escuchando. Su boca se abrió. No salió ningún sonido. Dominic Moretti no la miraba. Seguía mirando la botella. Dominic Moretti se incorporó en el sillón. Lo hizo lentamente, como un hombre se incorpora cuando aún no confía en el suelo. No apartó la manta de lana de cordero. Tomó su borde con las yemas de los dedos de su mano izquierda y la subió un par de centímetros por sus piernas, acomodándola contra sus muslos, como si siempre hubiera estado allí, como si el chico no lo acabara de cubrir con ella. El pequeño gesto le costó algo. Mantuvo el rostro impasible. Mantuvo la máscara fría y cautelosa que sus hombres conocían, que sus enemigos habían aprendido y en la que sus abogados habían cometido el error de confiar. Ella podría haberlo instruido. La voz fría en su cabeza insistía. La manta, el frasco de pastillas, toda una puesta en escena. No seas una presa fácil, revisa de nuevo. Así que hizo lo que siempre hacía cuando no quería confiar en lo que sentía. Lo puso a prueba. Levantó un dedo y señaló el reloj de oro rosa que brillaba sobre el escritorio. "Do you know what that is, Miss Bennett?" His voice had come back to him. Not the cracked voice of 30 seconds ago, the other one, low, even. The voice that did business across tables men did not leave standing from. Clara, still on her knees on the rug beside the armchair, with the orange bottle pressed to her chest, shook her head. She did not trust her mouth yet. $80,000. Dominic watched her face the way he watched men at cards. Patek Philippe. Limited run. And when I looked at the glass a moment ago, there was a fingerprint on the crystal. A small one. A child's. There was no fingerprint. He had not looked. He was still testing. Clara did not know that. The blood that had been pooling in her face drained the rest of the way out of it. Her lips went the color of paper. In Clara's world, in the world of a woman who cleaned other people's homes for $45 an hour and still could not pay her interest, there was no fighting a man like Dominic Moretti on a point of fact. If he said her son had touched the watch, her son had touched the watch. If he said his house was on fire, the house was on fire. Men like him did not have to be right. They only had to decide. She slid from her knees onto her heels, then forward, both hands flat on the rug in front of the armchair. She was shaking all through. "Mr. Moretti, please, please, take it out of my wages. Take all of them. I'll work for free. For a year, for 2 years, however long you want. Don't call the police. Please, sir." Her voice broke on the last word and put itself back together in a worse shape. "I don't have anybody. He doesn't have anybody but me. If I go, he goes into the system. And he can't. He needs his heart medicine every day. Sir, he has to have it Please." Dominic said nothing. He watched her. This was the moment the other 7 had failed. The moment the mask of motherhood came off, and the woman turned on the child. "Why did you do that? Why did you embarrass me? Why did you cost me my job?" He had heard all the lines. Clara did not say any of them. She half turned on the rug and pulled Ethan against her chest with one arm, putting her back between her son and the man in the chair, the way a woman turns a shoulder to an oncoming wind. "Not your fault, Ethan. Listen to Mommy. Not your fault, baby. I shouldn't have brought you here. It's Mommy's fault, not yours. Not yours." She was whispering it into a prayer, not arguing her case to Dominic, not performing for the man with the power over both of them, just saying it to her son, over and over, as if she was trying to make sure that whatever happened next in this room, the last words her boy heard, while he still believed in his mother, were the right ones. Dominic Moretti felt the mask slip another hairline. And then, very quietly, Ethan pushed his mother's arm away. Not roughly, the way a small boy moves a hand that is trying to protect him from something he has already decided he can handle. He slid out from under her, stepped past her, and walked across the rug on his own 2 feet, until he was standing in front of the armchair at full, unflinching height, which for a 7-year-old in wet sneakers was not very tall at all. He reached up under his collar. He drew out, over his head, a thin black leather cord. At the end of it hung a small, pale stone, round and milky, catching the firelight like something that held its own weather inside it. A moonstone, the size of a thumbnail. He had worn it under his shirt every day for 14 months. His mother had given it to his father on their wedding day. His father had worn it until the morning the hospice nurse had taken it off him, And then his mother had put it around Ethan's neck and told him, "This was Daddy's. Now it's yours. It keeps a part of him close." Ethan lifted the cord up and over his head and laid it, with both hands, on the mahogany desk, right beside the rose gold watch. He looked up at Dominic Moretti. His chin was steady. His eyes were his father's. "My daddy said this is a moonstone. He said it's really, really special." He swallowed. "Will you take it? For the watch? So my mommy doesn't owe you anymore." Dominic Moretti looked at the small, pale stone on the leather cord lying next to his $80,000 watch. He did not reach for it. He did not move at all. The moonstone caught the lamplight and gave it back in a soft, uneven glow, the way only uncut stones do. And something in Dominic's chest turned over like a key inside a lock that had rusted shut. Sophia had owned one almost exactly like it. He could see hers clearer in that instant than he had seen any memory in 3 years. A small, milky stone on a fine silver chain. She had worn it to their wedding, under the lace collar of her dress, because her grandmother had given it to her mother, and her mother had given it to her. It was in a walnut jewelry box upstairs, in the top drawer of the dresser that still held her clothes, locked, because he had put a lock on it himself a month after the funeral, so he would not open it on a bad night and lose whatever piece of himself was still holding. He had not touched that box in 3 years. He turned his face toward the fire. He did not want the woman on the other side of the rug to see what was happening to his eyes. He sat that way for a long minute, one hand on the armrest, the other buried in the lamb's wool blanket the boy had put over him, while the rain outside kept up its hard, steady work against the leaded glass. When he turned back, his voice, when he found it, was not the voice of the man Rosa had warned her about. "Clara, stand up, please. Come sit in that chair." He nodded at the wingback across from him. Clara did not understand. She rose anyway, on legs that were not entirely hers yet, and she crossed the rug with Ethan's hand still wound tight inside her own. She sat on the edge of the wingback the way a woman sits at a bad diagnosis. Ethan climbed up beside her and did not let go. Dominic took a breath. It went deeper than he had allowed one to go in a long time. "I wasn't asleep." Clara's head tilted a fraction. "I have never been asleep," he said. "Not in that chair. Not once. The money on the desk, the watch. I put them there. I put them where they could be reached. I've been doing it for almost 2 years. Clara, with every person Rosa hires." She did not speak. She only listened. 7 housekeepers before you. Every one of them took something. Cash from a drawer. A figurine. One of them took a set of cufflinks out of the study while I was 3 feet away pretending to snore. I fired them all. He swallowed. I did not fire them because I was angry. I fired them because I needed them to be exactly what I thought they were. Clara did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She looked at him with a tiredness that was older than her face, and she asked the only question that mattered. "You don't trust anybody anymore, do you, Mr. Moretti?" The question took the breath out of him cleaner than a punch. He looked at the silver frame on the bookshelf at the young woman in the yellow sundress, laughing. He looked at the boy pressed tight against the mother's side. He looked at Clara. And for the first time in 3 years, in a room he had chosen for its silence, with a fire he had lit for its coldness of heart, Dominic Moretti opened his mouth and told someone the truth. "Her name was Sophia," he said. "She was 32. She was 4 months pregnant. She was driving herself to the doctor. I was in a meeting I shouldn't have been in. I wasn't with her, and a car came out of a garage in Red Hook and hit her on the driver's side. The driver walked away. The plates were stolen. My wife died in the ambulance. The garage belonged to a man who does not like my family. I could not prove it. I still can't." He let the silence hold that because it needed to be held. 2 years ago, my cousin Vincent, my own blood, the man who was going to be my son's godfather, took $2 million out of an account only he and I had the key to, and he got on a plane to Costa Rica. He left me a note that said, "I'm tired." Last year, the lawyer who had my papers for 9 years was recording every conversation we had. He opened his hand in his lap as if he were showing her something. After Sophia, I built a wall, stone by stone, around the part of me that used to feel things. The wall kept me alive, Clara. It did. It kept me alive, and it kept me rich, and it kept me safe. And it put me in a cell I could not see the walls of. I have been in that cell for 3 years. He looked at the boy. "Your son just handed a stranger his heart medication," Dominic said, so quietly the fire almost ate it. A 7-year-old with a hole in his heart gave me his pills because he thought I was in pain. I did not believe people like that existed anymore. I had decided they did not. And your boy walked into my study in wet sneakers and made me a liar. Dominic stood up from the armchair. For the first time, Clara saw him at his full height, broad through the shoulders, lean through the waist, moving with the careful economy of a man who had been shot at before. He walked the few steps to the desk and picked up the leather cord with the moonstone on it, the way a man picks up a child's bird with more care than the object, on paper, deserved. He came back around the armchair. He went down on one knee in front of Ethan, a grown mob boss on one knee in a study in Long Island in front of a 7-year-old boy, in a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big. "Come here, son." Ethan slid down from the wingback and stepped forward. He stood between Dominic's knees, small and still, his chin almost level with the man's eyes. Dominic lifted the cord. He slipped it, slowly, carefully, over Ethan's head. He settled the moonstone against the front of the boy's sweatshirt, where his collarbone would be, and he straightened the leather at the back of his neck with the tips of 2 fingers. "You keep this," he said. "It was your father's. There is nothing on that desk, nothing in this house worth what this is. Do you understand me?" Ethan's small hand came up and closed around the stone. He nodded once, solemn as a priest. "Yes, sir." "Good." Dominic got back up. He walked to the desk. He opened the top drawer, took out a leather-bound checkbook and a pen, and stood there a moment with the pen over the paper like a man deciding how to sign his own name. Then he wrote, fast. He tore the check off cleanly, turned, and carried it across the rug to where Clara was sitting. He held it out to her. She took it with fingers that were still shaking. She looked down at the number, $340,000. And then, on the memo line, in a hand that was firmer than hers had been in a year, for Mr. David Bennett, paid in full. Her mouth opened. No sound came out of it for a full second. How she finally managed. "Mr. Moretti, how do you even know?" "Your background file has been in the drawer of that desk since the day Rosa hired you, Clara." His voice was quiet, not proud, not cruel, just flat. "I know every number on it. I know where your husband was treated. I know which account is still accruing. I know what your rent is. I know what the cardiologist charges. I know what the pharmacy charges. I know all of it." She pushed the check back toward him with both hands. "I can't take this. You don't owe us a thing. You don't owe me a thing. It isn't for you, Clara." Dominic did not take the check back. He just stood there, hand at his side. "It's for him." His eyes went, for the smallest instant, to the boy with the moonstone on his sweatshirt. "Your son loaned a stranger his heart medication. I can't give him back what that is. I can give him back the only thing I know how to give back. This is the number his father left behind. I am taking that number off his mother." Her throat made a sound that was not a word. Dominic kept going before she could find one. and I am going to ask you for something." She waited. "Ethan comes here every afternoon after school," he said. "He gets a room in this house on the second floor. He picks the color of the walls. He gets a tutor from whatever subjects he likes, and a pediatric cardiologist on retainer, the best one at Mount Sinai, whoever that is now, and he gets seen every month. Not charity. You will not hear that word out of my mouth." His voice gathered. "You stop cleaning. You become," clears throat, "the house manager. Proper salary. Health insurance that actually covers what he needs. Rosa trains you. She's wanted someone to train for years. This is a contract, Clara. I am offering you a contract because I need the two of you in this house." He stopped. He had said more in an hour than he had said to anyone except Tony in a year. Clara looked at Ethan. Ethan looked up at her. Small hands still closed around the stone at his chest, and he nodded. A slow, deliberate, 7-year-old nod. The kind of nod a child gives when he has already decided the adults are safe enough. Clara turned her face back to Dominic Moretti. Her eyes were wet. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Out in the corridor, in the narrow shadow beside the west wing door, Marco Russo stood with the flat of his shoulder against the wall and the flat of his ear 3 in from the gap. He had been listening for 15 minutes. He drew his phone out of the inner pocket of his suit jacket. He did not lift it to call. He tapped out a message with his thumb. 2 lines, the way a man does when he has already composed the sentence in his head. "Mr. C, he's got a weakness now. A kid." A pause. Then time to move. 3 months passed. The Moretti estate had not changed in 3 years. Then, in 12 weeks, it did. The first thing that changed was the curtains. Rosa had not asked permission. On the second Monday of November, she had gone room by room, the dining room, the east parlor, the library with the tall leaded windows, and she had tied back every heavy drape Dominic had closed on the morning of Sophia's funeral. Light came in. Real light. Winter gray, but alive. And it lit up furniture that had been waiting in the dark for 3 years for somebody to walk past it again. On the second floor, the third guest room from the landing became Ethan's room. He picked the color himself. "Space blue, please." A painter from Queens came for 3 days and left behind a ceiling of stars so accurate Ethan could find Orion's belt before he could find the light switch. Dominic drove into Manhattan on a Saturday alone. No driver, no bodyguard, just him behind the wheel of a black Range Rover, and came back with a Celestron neck star in a long cardboard box. He set it up in the bay window himself. He read the manual. His hands, which had done other kinds of careful work in other kinds of rooms, were oddly patient with the small brass knobs. Clara stopped wearing the uniform at the end of November. Rosa had walked her into the small paneled office next to the kitchen and said, "This is your office now, child. You take the keys. You take the log. You take the household accounts." The salary on Clara's new contract was $95,000 a year, with a health plan that covered the pediatric cardiologist at Mount Sinai in full. The first time Clara read the insurance card, with her son's name printed on it, she sat down on the closed lid of the kitchen trash can and cried for 10 minutes with her apron still in her lap. Rosa taught her everything: the vendors, the silver count, the wine cellar, which caterer to call for the fall event, and which caterer to never call again. Dominic taught her one thing himself. It was an old brass espresso machine from Naples, lever pull, copper-lined, which had belonged to his mother. It sat on a shelf in the butler's pantry, and no one, according to Rosa, had been allowed to touch it since 2009. On a Wednesday morning, Dominic carried it down to the kitchen counter with both hands and showed Clara how to tamp the grounds and when to pull the lever. He told her the small stories his mother had told him about each scratch on the copper. He had never told those stories to anyone, not even Sophia. He did not tell Clara that either. He just told the stories. Fridays became pasta night. On the first Friday in December, the three of them sat at the kitchen island, not the formal dining room, the kitchen island, and ate cacio e pepe off mismatched plates, while Ethan, mouth half full, explained the solar system in the order he had memorized from a library book. He got to Mercury. He tilted his head. He said, "Mercury is the fastest planet, Nick, because it's really close to the sun, like Mercury in Grand Theft Auto. He runs really fast." Dominic Moretti laughed, out loud, from his chest. The first full laugh to come out of his body in 3 years and 2 months. And it came out of him surprised, as if someone else had used his mouth. Clara put her fork down because she needed both hands to cover her own laugh. Ethan beamed, not entirely sure what was funny, pleased anyway. That night, after the boy had gone to bed with the telescope pointed at Jupiter, Ethan came down the back stairs in his pajamas, holding a piece of paper. He walked up to where Dominic was pouring himself a small glass of Amaro at the counter, and he held it up. Crayon. A tall man in a black suit. A woman with brown hair. A small boy in the middle. And, for reasons that belonged only to 7-year-olds, an orange cat. "That's your family, Nick." Dominic looked at the drawing for a long time. He walked to the refrigerator. He took a magnet shaped like a slice of pizza off the door. He pinned the drawing at eye level, right next to a small white card that read, in neat black capitals, a name and 1-800 number belonging to a specific field office of the FB. The card had been there for 9 months. It was there because Dominic liked to know, every morning when he took the milk out, exactly who he was and exactly who was watching. The drawing went up next to it, somewhere off the north-south arterial that runs the spine of Red Hook, past a storefront whose awning read, "The Red Olive" in red script, with a black olive dotting the I. Marco Russo sat at a back table across from a man with silver hair and a very expensive coat. He slid a manila envelope across the checkered tablecloth. Inside were photographs. A boy in a puffer jacket walking out of a school gate in Cold Spring Harbor. Backpack bouncing. A woman with brown hair at a Whole Foods parking lot loading 2 paper bags into the back of a leased SUV. A timestamp on every corner. A route map, hand-drawn on lined paper. Salvatore Camden thumbed through the photographs without expression. Pulled one out, the boy mid-step, laughing at something off-frame, and held it up to the low light of the pendant lamp. "He loves them," Camden said softly, not a question. Marco nodded once. Camden slid the picture back into the envelope. Good. Dominic Moretti was many things. A widower, a son of a dead king, a man who had pinned a child's crayon drawing to his refrigerator. He was not naive. 7 years running, the family had trained him to feel a loose board in the floor, the same way his father had felt it through the sole of the shoe, long before the eye could see a crack in the wood. In the 3 weeks after the first Friday pasta night, 3 boards went loose. The first was a shipment, 6 containers of Sicilian Bianco, and a few crates that were not, on paper, Bianco, rerouted out of Gioia Tauro and bonded through a broker in New Jersey. The schedule had been held in 3 heads, and 3 heads only. Dominic's, Tony Greco's, Marco Russo's. On a Tuesday morning, 2 customs officers and a dog that did not belong to customs walked onto the pier in Elizabeth and stopped Container 4. The losses, to the penny, were $1, $2 million, and the relationship with the Calabrian, who had packed Container 4. The The second was a man, Giuseppe Lanza, 61, a bookmaker in Fort Lee who had run numbers for the Morettis since Dominic's father was alive. Marco had arranged the sit-down at a steakhouse in Secaucus on a Wednesday. At 11:40 that night, Giuseppe had walked out to his Lincoln in the parking lot, and two men Giuseppe had never met had stepped out from behind a Suburban and put 4 rounds into him before the valet had finished bringing the next car around. The shooters disappeared. Giuseppe's widow got the phone call at 12:08 a.m. Dominic got his at 12:19. The third was an address, a small 2-bedroom on Ovington Avenue in Brooklyn, a place nobody was supposed to know about, with 2 sets of papers in the floor of the hall closet and a safe behind the hot water heater. On a Saturday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Dominic had sent a courier to the apartment, and the courier had come back white. The door had been kicked in. The papers were gone. The safe had been cut with a torch. 3 rooms, 3 weeks, 3 facts. And in all 3 of them, Marco Russo's hands on the paperwork. On the Sunday after the Ovington door, Dominic called Tony Greco out to the estate in the early afternoon, when Clara had taken Ethan to Mount Sinai for a scheduled cardiology check. Tony was 40, a decade older than he looked. He had started with Dominic's father at 20, 2 years before Dominic had taken his first communion, and he had never once asked for a thing he had not earned. He stood in the study now, coat still on, hands behind his back, waiting. "Marco," Dominic said. Tony did not need the rest of the sentence. "How deep?" "As deep as you can go," quietly. Look at his phone, his bank boxes, the wife in Queens, his mother in Sicily, the cousin in the Bronx that he says isn't a cousin. Everything. "And if it is him, boss, then you bring me the bricks before you bring me the man," Dominic said. "I want evidence first. I will decide what happens second." Tony nodded and went. Dominic did not move against Marco that day. He could not yet, because 5 years before, on a loading pier in Sunset Park, 4 Camden men had come out of a refrigerated trailer with suppressed 9s, and one of them had lined the sights on Dominic's back from 9 feet away. It had been Marco, 24 at the time, the skinniest of Dominic's street guys, who had turned on his heel and stepped into the line and taken the round meant for Dominic's spine, full through the meat of the right shoulder. The bullet had lodged behind the scapula. The surgeon at Methodist had decided it was to leave it than to dig it out. It was still in there. Marco could not raise his right arm past ear height without wincing. Every time Dominic had watched him do it in 5 years, to comb his hair, to reach for a coffee cup, to sign a contract, Dominic had heard, on the edge of memory, a voice at 24 years old in a hospital bed saying, "You're my brother, boss. I ain't ever going to be anyone else's." He had believed that. He still, in a soft and foolish chamber at the back of his heart, wanted to. That night, after Clara had gone to bed, Dominic walked up the back stairs in sock feet and stopped in the doorway of Ethan's room. The boy was asleep on his side, one cheek flattened against the pillow, the small brown bear Dominic had given him in one arm. The celestron was still pointed at the window, cap off. The moonstone was on the nightstand beside a half-drunk cup of water. Dominic stood there a long time, hand on the doorframe. He did not go in. He only watched the rise and fall of the boy's chest under the space blue blanket, and listened to the small, even rhythm of a breathing that was not, tonight, in the wrong pattern. He pressed the flat of his own hand against his sternum without thinking. He felt, under his shirt, the movement of his own heart. The thought that came then came whole. The way some thoughts do. In 3 years, I have not had a thing to lose that wasn't money. I have 1 now. I have 2. He closed his eyes in the dark hallway and understood, with a clarity sharper than any bullet had ever given him, that this fear, this new, quiet, child-shaped fear, was bigger than any fear Salvatore Camden could put inside him. He crossed the rug in his stocking feet. He bent over the bed. He pressed a kiss, dry, careful, almost disbelieving, to the top of Ethan's head. Then he went out. Clara came into the study the next morning with a silver tray in her hands. One espresso, pulled the way he had taught her. A small glass of water. A sugar cube she had stopped giving him a month ago because he had stopped taking it. She crossed the rug with the practiced silence of a woman who had learned where the floorboards of this house complained, and she set the tray on the corner of the mahogany desk without a rattle. Then she did not leave. Dominic looked up from the ledger. He was not really reading. Clara had dressed for the office today. A charcoal wool skirt, a cream blouse, a thin silver chain at her neck. 3 months in the house had softened the hollows under her eyes. Ethan's insurance card had softened the set of her mouth. She looked for the first time like a woman who slept 5 nights out of 7. Her hands were folded at her waist. The left one held the right one a little too tightly. Nick. She had started calling him that in the 2nd month, but only in the private rooms, and only at the small, off-duty hours, where the house was not a mafia house, but a kitchen with a child in it. Here in the study, in the morning, with business on the desk, the word landed differently. "May I speak with you a moment, please?" He gestured at the wingback chair across from him, the same chair she had sat in on the day of the test, her son under her arm. She sat. She kept her knees together and her hands in her lap. "I need to tell you something I should have told you 3 months ago." Dominic set the pen down. She took a breath that went all the way down. "The first day I brought Ethan here, the Sunday, I came in early. I walked him down the west corridor to bring him here, to the study, while you were pretending to sleep." Her mouth moved around a small, wry apology for a moment. "On the way, I passed Marco in the corridor. He was by the east window, on the phone. He was speaking quietly. He didn't see me." Until I was already past him. Dominic's face did not change. The back of his neck did. "He said," Clara went on, keeping her voice very even, "Yeah, he's alone in the study. The new maid is with him. I'll keep you posted, Mr. C." The words landed in the room one after the other, like coins dropped on marble. At the time, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know who Mr. C was. I thought he was talking to a partner or a supplier or one of the lawyers. I was the new housekeeper. I was scared of my own shadow. Saying something to you then, I would have been a woman off the street telling the boss his right hand was dirty. Rosa had told me not to speak unless spoken to, and I stopped. She looked at her hands. "Last week, at the vendor meeting, Rosa referred to a man as Mr. Camden. I heard the initial. I heard your voice in my head when you told me about Sophia. I put it together." Dominic had gone very still in his chair. He was not looking at Clara. He was looking past her, at the far corner of the study, and Clara could almost see him doing the arithmetic inside his own head. The date she was describing, the morning schedule of Giuseppe Lonza, which had not yet, on that Sunday, been finalized. The exact 48 hours during which Marco had been the only one who could have passed the sit-down's time and place to anyone outside the family. The pieces clicked. Dominic Moretti looked back at Clara. His voice, when he found it, was almost a whisper. "Why are you telling me now?" She did not look away. "Because now I trust you." She let that sit. Asterisk. 3 months ago I didn't. 3 months ago, you were a man Rosa had warned me about. You were a room I had been told not to breathe in. Asterisk. Her mouth softened at the corner, very slightly. "I have been watching you, Nick, for 3 months. I watched a man who, for reasons he did not have to, paid a stranger's medical debt. A man who read the manual on a telescope out loud to my son because my son couldn't read the long words yet. A man who put my boy's drawing next to an FBI card on his refrigerator and did not explain the card to me because he didn't need to. Because you are not going to be what that card is about anymore. Her voice caught on the last word, and she pushed on. I am telling you now, because I think you deserve to know. Dominic did not speak for a long moment. Then he reached across the desk. He laid his hand wide, scarred across 2 knuckles, warm on top of hers, where it rested on the polished wood. He did not grip. He did not pull her closer. He just laid his palm over the back of her fingers and let it be. It was the first time he had touched a woman deliberately, skin to skin, in 3 years and 4 months. Her hand was warm, alive, steady under his. He held it for 1 beat. 2. He took his hand back. Pack a bag for you and a bag for Ethan tonight, after dinner, he said. His voice had dropped into the register Tony knew. Work voice. Boss voice. The voice that meant a decision had been made and would not be unmade. Small bags. Essentials. His medication in the carry-on, not in the luggage. Tell him it's a weekend trip to the country. I have a house outside New Canaan. Nobody in the organization but Tony knows about it. And Tony is the only one who is going to drive you there. You leave at 10. You don't say goodbye to anyone in this house. Not to Rosa, not to the driver, not to the cook. He held her eyes. I need a few days, Clara. I need a few days to deal with Marco before he knows that I know. Marco Russo already knew. 5 weeks before, on a night he had been alone in the house finishing a payroll ledger, he had stood on a stepladder in the study and slipped a 3mm microphone behind the walnut trim that ran along the top of the bookshelves. It was hair-thin, magnetic, wired to a burner relay that dumped a compressed audio file to a server in Queens every 6 hours. He had paid a Russian kid in Gravesend $8,000 for the unit. He had told himself it was insurance. He had told himself, the first time the file transmitted, that he was only listening in case. He was not only listening in case. He had heard every word. He had been in his sedan 4 blocks off the estate when that morning's file uploaded to his phone. He had listened to it in the parked car with the engine running and the defroster on. He had heard Clara's voice say, "Yeah, he's alone in the study. The new maid is with him. I'll keep you posted, Mr. C." And he had heard Dominic say, "Pack a bag for you and a bag for Ethan tonight after dinner." He had heard the words, New Canaan. He had heard Tony is the only one who is going to drive you there. He had sat very still for 90 seconds. Then he had called the Red Olive from a third phone and said 4 words. It has to be tonight. At 11:04 p.m., the rain on Long Island was in its second straight hour of a hard, steady fall. 4 men in dark jackets, wool caps, and latex gloves came over the back wall of the estate. At the point between the 2 cameras Marco had degraded the firmware on earlier in the week. The security panel in the guard booth showed all green. It would keep showing all green for another 40 minutes. Marco had timed it. The men crossed the lawn in a line and came to the service door at the rear of the kitchen. It was already unlocked. They went in. Rosa was on the short flight of stairs that came down to the kitchen pantry. She had been carrying a small china cup of chamomile up to Ethan's room. A boy who has trouble sleeping the night before a trip needs chamomile. Not questions, she had told herself, and she had switched on the pantry light just as the first man stepped through the door. She opened her mouth to scream. The second man had been ready for a scream. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and brought the butt of a pistol down on the side of her head before the sound got past her teeth. The china cup broke on the tile floor. Rosa went down sideways against the doorframe. Blood came out of her temple and pooled into the grout between two tiles. 2 men stayed with her. The other 2 went up the back stairs. Clara was in Ethan's room at the end of the hall on the 2nd floor. She had a small navy duffel open on the bed, and she was folding the boy's thickest sweater into it when she heard the sound the kitchen made. It was not a noise she could name, just wrong. She straightened. She went to the doorway. She had one hand on the jamb when the first man came around the corner of the hall with a damp white cloth already balled in his glove. She opened her mouth to get her son's name out of it. The cloth went over her nose and her mouth, and the back of her head hit the molding of the doorframe, and her knees went before she did. In the bedroom, Ethan was sitting cross-legged on the space blue bedspread with an open library book on Jupiter and a half-bitten apple beside his knee. He looked up when he heard the sound in the hall. He saw his mother's face slide down out of the doorframe and the arm of a man behind her. He did not scream. Ethan had been through an OR at 5. He had been through the last 8 months of his father's dying. He knew the difference between a moment you could scream at and a moment you had to move through. He slid off the far side of the bed in one motion and ran for the bay window with the telescope, which was the only window in the room that opened. He did not make it. A gloved hand caught him around the ribs from behind and lifted him half off the rug. He kicked. His small feet in their sock print socks hit shin and knee and the leather arm that was not going to let go. Another hand brought a cloth to his face. It smelled sweet. Too sweet. Wrong sweet. He held his breath for 3 seconds. 4. The way the anesthesiologist had once told him not to. His lungs burned. He went black at the edges. Through the narrowing tunnel of what he could still see, he saw a shape step into the bedroom doorway. Broad shoulders, dark suit, a gold pinky ring catching the hall light. The boy's head lolled. He looked up, honestly confused, the way a 7-year-old looks at an adult he has had Christmas dinner with. "Uncle Marco," he said, very softly, "where are you taking me?" Marco Russo stopped in the doorway. For 1 second, just one, something passed across his face that did not belong there. Not pity. Something older. Something that had not been used in a long time. The eyes of a man who had once, at 24, stepped into a bullet for another man, because the other man had called him brother. Then the corner of his mouth came up, a little too late to be a smile. "Going to meet some new friends, kid." The cloth stayed over Ethan's face. The tunnel closed. Clara and Ethan went down the back stairs in the arms of strangers. Rosa lay on the pantry tile. The kitchen door clicked shut. A black panel van slid out of the service drive with its lights off, picked up its headlights once it cleared the iron gate, and turned west into the rain. At the same moment, Ethan's head was going black in a gloved arm on the 2nd floor of the Moretti estate. Dominic Moretti was 41 miles away, sitting in the back booth of the dock. The dock was the family's oldest front, a seafood house on the Brooklyn side of the Narrows. A long room of green leather booths and yellow light. The kitchen had closed at 11. The doors were locked. The cook had gone home. Tony Greco sat across the booth from Dominic with a folder of printed bank records and a photograph of Marco's Queen's mistress. They had been at it for 2 hours. The plan was a 3-day plan. Quiet, surgical, stripping Marco of money, of alibis, of places to run. Not a bullet. Not yet. Dominic had wanted it clean. At 1:04 a.m., Dominic's phone rang. He looked at the screen. House line. Not a cell. The landline in the security booth at the front gate. The voice on the other end was Gio, one of the night men. And Gio was 23, and Gio was trying very hard to sound like a man. "Boss, there's something. You need to come back." "Say it, Gio." "Boss, I think you need to come back." Dominic was already out of the booth. He drove himself. He did not let Tony drive. The black Range Rover came through the rain on the LIE at 95 miles an hour, with Tony in the passenger seat on 2 phones at once. Neither of them spoke past a single question from Dominic halfway out. "Who answered the alarm panel?" Tony's answer. Flat. "Nobody, boss. The panel is dark." At 2:02 a.m., he came through his own front gate. The service door at the back of the kitchen was standing open. Rain had blown into the pantry. The light was on. Rosa was on the tile on her side. She was alive. Her chest was moving. A shallow pool of blood had dried on the grout by her temple, and a shard of a china cup was caught in the apron at her hip. One of Dominic's men was already on his knees beside her, pressing a folded dish towel to the wound. Dominic went down on one knee in the blood. He took her hand. "Rosa, Rosa, it's me. Stay with me." Her eyes opened in slow, painful fractions. She saw him. She tried to smile. She could not make her mouth do it. "Marco," she whispered. "It was Marco, Nick. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I couldn't hold them." "You don't apologize, Rosa. You don't apologize to me." He turned his head. "Get Dr. Pozzi. Now. My car. Not an ambulance. No hospital record. Go." 2 men lifted her. They were careful the way his father's men had always been careful with the women of the house. Dominic watched them carry her out, and then he stood up with her blood on the knees of his trousers and went up the back stairs. Ethan's door was open. The library book on Jupiter was open on the floor, spine up, pages bent. The bedspread was half off the mattress. The telescope was still pointed at the window, as if nothing had changed. Clara's door was open. The Clear's throat, navy duffel, was open on the bed. Folded sweaters were scattered, one on the floor. Her purse was on the dresser, keys still in it. Her phone was beside the keys. She had not had time to reach for any of it. Dominic walked down the back stairs slowly. In the kitchen, he stopped in front of the refrigerator. The crayon drawing was still there. The tall man in the black suit. The woman with brown hair. The small boy in the middle. The orange cat. The FBI card next to it with its neat black capitals. He stood there a long time with his hand flat on the steel door. And then Dominic Moretti, who had not cried at the news of Sophia's death, who had pressed the palms of his hands against his wife's closed casket and felt nothing come out of his eyes folded. His knees went. He went down onto the kitchen tile in a slow, awful slide, with his shoulder against the stainless steel, and his face broke. Not the clean tears of a man at a funeral, a raw, shattering sound. One hand over his mouth to keep it inside his teeth, the other fisted into the hem of the drawing, as if he were trying to hold the crayon paper together with his own grip. His shoulders shook. He did not make words. He did not try to. 10 minutes later, Tony found him there. Tony did not touch him. Tony stood in the doorway with his coat still dripping rain on the kitchen tile and waited until Dominic was ready. When Dominic stood up, he was not the man who had folded. He dragged the back of his wrist once across his mouth. He walked past Tony without looking at him. He went down the hall to the gun room. He keyed the code on the cabinet his father had built and took out what his father had left him, a nickel. Desert Eagle, .50. Handles worn smooth. The only firearm in the house that Dominic had ever held, with something like love. He came back into the kitchen with it hanging at his side. He looked at Tony. "Call everyone," he said. "Everyone we still trust. Every man who picked up the phone on the night my father died. Tonight we go to Red Hook." Tony's face did not move, but his voice when he found it was careful. "Boss, if we hit Camden direct on his own block, you understand what starts. We go to war. We don't get to stop where we want to stop." Dominic turned his head. He looked at the refrigerator, at the crayon family, at the orange cat. "I already lost one family, Tony." He looked back at his underboss, and his eyes were the eyes of the man who had taken the chair at 30. "I am not losing the second one. The war already started. The only thing left to decide is who dies first." Clara came back in pieces. First, the smell motor oil, old diesel, rust. Then a weight in her wrists that was not hers. Then a yellow light, the sick urine yellow of a single bulb hanging from a high ceiling on a dusty cord. She opened her eyes to a warehouse. It was an old one, big, the kind with steel beams painted ox blood 40 years ago, and a concrete floor stained in long overlapping rings from equipment that was no longer there. A chain fell across the far wall. Rain was hitting the high clerestory windows in a pattern she recognized from her own apartment in Bay Ridge, the rain that came off the water in Red Hook. Her hands were behind the back of a wooden chair, bound at the wrists with something plastic that bit when she moved. She turned her head. Ethan was 10 feet away, sitting on top of a wooden crate, not tied. His feet did not reach the floor. He had the moonstone in his fist, pressed to his chest the way he used to hold it in the ICU. He was watching the far door. She did not call out. She made a sound low in her throat that he would know was hers. His head turned. He saw her. He did not cry. He did not speak. He closed his small hand tighter around the stone and stayed on the crate, because the men who had put him there had told him to stay on the crate. And Ethan was a boy who had learned young that the rules given by bad people were sometimes the rules that kept you alive. A side door opened. A man came in, He was 55 years old, and the rain and the yellow bulb together did him no favors. Silver hair combed straight back off a high forehead, a long bull-hide coat that had been expensive in Milan, a gold crucifix at his throat. His shoes had dry rims of water on them. He smiled at Clara. The smile did not use his eyes. "Mrs. Bennett," he said. He came across the concrete floor slowly, the soles of his shoes tapping. "Forgive the accommodations. The house I usually take guests to is being repainted." Clara did not answer. She set her jaw. She lifted her chin. "So," Salvatore Camden said, walking a slow half-circle around her chair, "you are the one who softened Dominic Moretti." He said the name the way he would have said a brand of wine he no longer drank. I was curious. For 3 months I have been curious. I told Marco, I said, "Marco, describe the woman to me." He did a poor job. "You are more beautiful than he made you." Clara still did not speak. Camden stopped in front of her. He bent down until his face was level with hers. His breath smelled of peppermint and something under it. "Does the boy know his mother is a hostage, Mrs. Bennett?" he said pleasantly. "Or did you tell him it was a game?" Clara did not look at Ethan. She would not give the old man the satisfaction of her eyes moving. Camden straightened. He walked the 10 feet to the crate. He crouched down in front of Ethan, the way a man crouches in front of a dog he is pretending is friendly. "And you, little friend." His voice softened a full octave. "Are you frightened?" Ethan looked at him, 7 years old, the moonstone still clenched in one fist, the other hand flat on the wood of the crate beside his thigh. He looked directly into Salvatore Camden's eyes and did not blink. "You're a bad man," Ethan said, quiet and clear. "And you're hurting." Camden laughed, a short, surprised sound. "Hurting, am I? Where am I hurting, little friend?" My daddy said people only do bad things when they're hurting somewhere, Ethan said. You're hurting. I can see it in your eyes. The laugh went out of Camden's face. It did not get replaced with anger. It got replaced with something worse. A blank, slow thing. The way a mask looks when the light behind it goes off. He held the child's gaze for a long second. Then he stood up without answering. He turned on his heel and walked back toward the side door. Behind him, standing just inside the door with his jacket on and his face carefully arranged, Marco Russo had been watching the whole thing. When Camden passed him, Camden muttered something short. Marco nodded. But Marco's eyes, for the first time since he had walked into Ethan's bedroom in the Moretti house, were not on Camden. They were on the boy on the crate. The two men stepped out through the side door. A heavy industrial latch clanged. Ethan waited until the footfalls were gone. Then he slid off the crate, landed soft on the concrete in his sock print socks, and crossed the 10 feet of dusty floor to his mother's chair. He put one small hand on top of her tied-together wrists. The other he kept closed around the moonstone mommy she had been holding for him. She could not hold any more. Her eyes filled. "Mommy, don't be scared." He said it the way a grown man might say it, the way David had said it to her once in a third-floor room at Sloan Kettering, when his own hand had what? Been the one on top of hers. I was in the OR by myself, remember? When I was little, I did that. And I'm still here. His voice wobbled for one instant and steadied. We're going to be still here, okay? Clara's whole face came apart. She dropped her forehead gently against the top of his. She could not wipe her eyes. Her hands were behind the chair, so her son lifted his sleeve, very carefully, and with the cuff of his sweatshirt, his father's old sweatshirt, the gray one, the color of pigeons, he wiped the tears off his mother's cheek. The child she had been trying to save was saving her at 3:07 a.m. 12 men in dark coats came out of 3 vehicles on 3 corners of a block in Red Hook. The block smelled of salt water and old fuel oil. A sodium lamp at the end of the street buzzed against the rain. The warehouse's corrugated metal walls painted the color of dried blood. A faded letter that had once been part of a shipping company's name, still clinging above the big roll-up door, sat between a chain-link lot full of rusted trailers and the black edge of the buttermilk channel. Dominic Moretti was in the middle car, passenger seat, the Desert Eagle in his lap, and Tony Greco at the wheel. He knew the address because of a man named Vinny Calabrese. Vinny was 26 years old, a gopher in the Camden crew, good for parking the car and not much else. Tony's men had picked him up outside a Numbers house on Van Brunt Street at 1:40 a.m., and Tony had spent a careful 45 minutes in the back of a panel van that did not smell good when Tony was finished with it. Vinny had given up the warehouse at the 39-minute mark. He had given up the side door Marco would come out of at the 42. At 45, Tony had handed him off to 2 of his men and told them where to leave him. Alive, hurt, findable. Dominic had listened to the recording twice in the car on the way in. He did not need to listen a third time. Tony's hand came up. 3 fingers. The 3 crews split. Crew 1, 4 men, went to the main roll-up. Crew 2, 4 men, flanked around to the loading dock at the rear. Crew 3, Dominic, Tony, and 2 others came across the broken asphalt to the small side door Vinny had named. At 3:09, Crew 1 hit the front. The sound came all at once. 2 shotgun blasts to blow the padlock hinge, the roll-up door shrieking on its track as men threw it up. A man on the Camden side shouting something short before another shot ate the end of it. The burst of automatic fire was controlled. 3 rounds, 3 rounds, 3 rounds. Dominic's men fired like men who did not want to waste bullets, because men who wasted bullets did not come home. Crew 2 went in through the dock at the same moment. A pane of glass in the back office went out in a long diagonal. Dominic kicked in the side door. They took the first hallway in 9 seconds. 2 Camden men rounded a corner with weapons up. Tony dropped one with a shot to the chest plate and another to the throat above it. The second raised his pistol. Dominic did not. 3 minutes. That is how long it took, start to finish, for the Moretti line to clear the warehouse floor and reach the inner door of the back office, where Vinny had said the woman and the boy would be. 6 Camden soldiers were on the concrete behind them. 2 Moretti men had taken rounds in the vest and were still standing. One had a furrow across his jaw he would keep as a reminder. Dominic did not wait for Tony to stack on the door. He put his shoulder into it once to test the frame. He stepped back, lifted his right boot, and kicked it through at the latch. Inside, Clara in the wooden chair, hands behind her, cheek bruised where she had hit the door frame in her own house 2 hours ago. Alive, eyes on him the instant the door came off. Ethan on the floor beside her chair, one small hand on her knee, moonstone at his throat. Alive. Marco Russo standing 3 feet behind them, a nickel 9mm already up and coming around. Salvatore Camden. In the far corner of the room, half a step out of the overhead light, his long coat still on, and for the first time in Dominic's memory, the old man's face was not arranged. The mask had slipped. There was real, unprotected fear in it. Marco's pistol found Ethan's temple. Not another step, Nick. His voice cracked in the middle of his own name. I swear to God, one more step and this boy is done. You hear me? Done. Dominic froze on the threshold. Tony, at his shoulder, Clear's throat, froze the same instant. Tony's rifle was up and level. Tony was not breathing. Dominic's hand closed around the grip of the Desert Eagle, the way a man closes his hand around a memory. The eyes looking at Marco were not the eyes Ethan had seen teaching him a telescope. They were the eyes of a widower at a closed casket 3 years ago. They were the eyes of the boy who had come home from his father's funeral at 30 and taken a chair no one had wanted him to take. Marco. The one word came out flat. Level. I treated you like a brother. I paid your mother's rent in Palermo every month for 11 years. I bought your wife the house in Middle Village when your daughter was born. I was the second person in that hospital room. Marco's jaw shifted. Why? Marco's mouth made a smile that was not a smile. Chewed. Sour. The smile of a man who had rehearsed an answer in the mirror. Because Camden pays double, Nick. The pistol did not waver. It sat against Ethan's temple like something attached to the boy. And because you never, not one day, not one night, treated me like an equal. I was your soldier. I was your shield. I was the guy in the car who made sure your dinner was still warm when you got home. I was never your brother. I was a second stringer in a suit. Dominic looked at him across 10 feet of concrete. The rain was still going outside. He could hear it on the clear estuary glass. Marco. His voice was almost gentle now. I treated you like a brother. You just never knew it. Nobody moved. The rain on the clear estuary glass. The distant drip of something in a corner of the warehouse. Tony's breathing, controlled, behind Dominic's right shoulder. That was all. Marco's pistol was seated against Ethan's temple. His trigger finger was on the trigger, not against the guard. Marco was sweating at his hairline, even though it was 41 degrees in the warehouse. His wrist had the faintest tremor in it, the kind a man's wrist does when the adrenaline has been up for an hour and he has not yet figured out which door he is walking out of. Dominic did not move, because Dominic had done enough of this in his life to know that the man with the gun against the child's head needed to be given 2 seconds of stillness to remember he was. Somewhere under the suit, a person. Clara, Clear's throat, did not move, because Clara's hands were still tied behind the chair. and because her son had asked her, with his eyes, not to. Ethan did not move, not at first. He stood by his mother's knee with the moonstone at his throat, and his small face entirely in the wrong expression for a 7-year-old, with a 9mm against his skull. He was not panicking. He was doing what he had done at 5, on a gurney, in the 3 feet before the OR doors. He was thinking. He had seen where the pill bottle was, before they had tied his mother. His own digoxin, in the pocket of his pajama pants. The gloved man who had put him on the crate had patted him down for weapons, found a pill bottle, rolled his eyes, and shoved it back in. A child's prescription, not worth taking. Very slowly, the way he had once slid a toy car across the ICU blanket without pulling on the chest tube. Ethan slid his right hand into that pocket. His fingers closed around the orange plastic. He drew it out. He did not throw it. He simply let it fall, open palm, as if he had forgotten he was holding it. The bottle hit the concrete with a small, bright, hollow sound and bounced once, twice, and rolled on its belly in a straight, yellow-orange line across the floor, straight toward Marco's right foot. Reflex is older than loyalty. Reflex is older than greed. Any man who has ever heard something drop in the dark looks down. Marco looked down. It was not a long look, half a second. Less. In that half second, Dominic Moretti's right arm came up. The Desert Eagle was already level with Marco's collarbone. The sights had been there for 90 seconds. Dominic did not aim now. He only squeezed. The round took Marco in the meat of the right shoulder, high, deliberate, 6 inches lower than his throat, and 2 inches outside the spine. The same shoulder, the exact shoulder that had been hit at 24 years old on a loading pier in Sunset Park, on a night a younger Marco had stepped into a bullet meant for a younger Dominic. The 9mm fell out of Marco's hand. Marco went down sideways against the wall, then slid onto the concrete with a short, gutted grunt. He did not scream. He had been shot before. He knew how. Ethan was moving before Marco hit the floor. He turned and ran the 3 steps to Clara and buried his face in her shoulder. Tony was already on Marco's fallen pistol, kicking it across the concrete to his own foot and cutting the plastic tie on Clara's wrists with a folding blade in one clean pass. In the far corner of the room, Salvatore Camden raised both hands, palms empty and open, and went to his knees on the concrete without being asked. He was a man of a certain generation. He knew when a floor had been taken, and by whom. Tony crossed to him, put one gloved hand on the top of his silver head, and zip-tied his wrists behind his back with the patience of a man tying off garbage bag. Dominic crossed the room. He did not raise the Desert Eagle again. He stopped over Marco, where Marco lay on his side with one hand clamped to his shoulder and blood coming slow and dark between the fingers. Marco's eyes found Dominic's face. For a long second, neither man spoke. Dominic did not pull the trigger the second time. He went down on one knee beside Marco on the cold concrete, close enough that the other man could hear him without Dominic raising his voice. "Marco," he said. His voice was tired, not cruel, almost kind. "I have owed you 1 bullet for 5 years, since the pier." He glanced very briefly at the wound in Marco's right shoulder, the same place Marco had taken for him. "Consider it paid. You and I are square. We don't owe each other anything anymore." Marco's mouth worked. Whatever came out of it was thick, half blood, half word. But his eyes, for the first time since the doorway of Ethan's bedroom, were not the eyes of a man performing. "Boss," he rasped. "I'm sorry." Dominic did not answer him. He stood up. At that same moment, far off, carried across the rain-soaked street between the warehouse and the water, the first siren started. They were not the short chirps of a patrol car answering a call. They were the long, stacked sirens of a tactical response. Federal, not city. Dominic had placed the call himself from the Range Rover at 2:47 a.m. Tony had spent the last 2 days with the files Clara had given them a direction for. Feeding an agent at the Manhattan field office everything they had put together. Camden crew, the smuggling routes, Giuseppe's hit. 3 other names Dominic had never spoken out loud, even in his own kitchen. This time, Dominic Moretti was not going to handle it by the old rules. This time, the old man in the corner with the silver hair was going to meet a federal judge. The agents came in 10 minutes later in blue windbreakers with 3 yellow letters across the back. They took Camden in his long bull-hide coat, hands behind his back, still wearing the gold crucifix at his throat. They took Marco on a stretcher, conscious, his right arm already going numb. They took statements from Tony's men that had been pre-drafted by a lawyer who was not Arthur Goldberg. Clara, Ethan, and Dominic walked out of the warehouse together. Clara with her coat around the boy, Ethan with his small hand wound tight into the hem of Dominic's jacket, Dominic with the Desert Eagle already logged and bagged by a federal agent on the way in. The red and blue lights rolled across the 3 of them in slow, silent passes. None of them spoke. At 5 in the morning, the rain had thinned to a fine gray mist, and the windows of the Moretti estate were back to showing only themselves. Rosa was stable. Dr. Pozzi had called from Mount Sinai at 4:12 and said the words no one had dared ask for. Concussion, not fracture. 8 stitches. She was already asking when she could go home. Clara had pressed the phone to her own chest for a full minute after the call ended, before she could give it back. Now the house was quiet. No men in the hallways, no driver at the gate, but Tony's cousin Mike, who did not sleep and did not ask questions. The kettle in the kitchen ticked down from its last boil. The fire in the study had burned low to a slow orange heart. Ethan was asleep on Dominic's chest. They were in the burgundy leather armchair, the same chair in the same study where 3 months ago, Dominic Moretti had closed his eyes and put a loaded pistol under his thigh and waited for a stranger to prove the world was the shape he needed it to be. Now the chair held a different weight, a sleeping boy in space blue pajamas, moonstone still around his neck, one small hand curled in the lapel of Dominic's jacket, like he had fallen asleep holding something he did not intend to let go of. Clara sat across from them on the wingback with a cashmere throw around her shoulders and a mug of tea in her lap that she had not yet drunk. Neither of them had spoken for a long time. Finally, Clara spoke first. Quietly, the way she would have spoken in Ethan's room if he had been in his own bed. "Nick, after tonight, I think Ethan and I should go." Dominic looked at her across the rug. He did not answer right away. He settled his hand a little higher on the boy's back so that the slow rise and fall of Ethan's breathing would not wake him. "Your life," Clara said, "is too dangerous. I don't want him to grow up with nights like tonight, with rooms like that warehouse. I can't give him that. I won't." Dominic looked at her a long time. When he answered, his voice was low, and it had in it a steadiness she had not heard from him before. "Clara, I decided something on the drive home from Red Hook. I'm done." She raised her eyes. "I'm stepping out," Dominic said. "Tony takes over the legal side, the restaurants, the construction firm, the liquor distribution that is actually a liquor distribution. The rest of it, the other ledger, the part of the family business my father started in 1963, ends with me, tonight. Nick." I met with the United States Attorney 4 weeks ago. Quietly. One room, no lawyers at the table, no recording. I told her what I had on Camden. She told me what she had on me. We understood each other. I'm going to cooperate, Clara. Fully. Clara's hand stilled around the mug. You know, she said carefully, if you cooperate, the other families, they will. They will, Dominic said. Yes. He did not look away from her when he said it. I have a plan for that. Tony already knows. The house gets sold. The cars get sold. The name on my passport stops being mine. There is a town in northern Michigan where a man named Daniel Moreno is going to open a construction office in the spring. That man has a very dull resume and a very clean credit report. He almost smiled at that. Not quite. More than any of it. Clara, I cannot keep living the life I was living, being the man I am now. The two things do not fit in the same chest. One of them has to go. It is not going to be this one. He looked down at Ethan on his shoulder. He bent his head. He pressed a dry, careful kiss to the top of the boy's hair. Then he raised his eyes to Clara again. Clara, I am not asking you to be my wife. Not tonight. Maybe not ever, if that is not what you want. I am asking you something smaller and harder than that. He took a breath. Stay. She did not speak. Stay, while we find out what we are to each other. Ethan needs a place. He needs a room with stars painted on the ceiling and a kitchen where somebody laughs out loud at what he says about Mercury. I need the two of you. I cannot put it any more honestly than that. Clara looked at him across the rug for what felt like a long time. Tears came, quietly, the way tears come at the end of a very long day. She did not wipe them. She set the mug on the small table at her elbow. She stood up, the cashmere throw falling off her shoulders. She crossed the rug. She knelt beside the armchair, next to her sleeping son, and she put her arms around both of them, around Ethan's small, warm back, around Dominic's broad, tired one. And she held on. Dominic turned his face into her hair. His free hand came up and found the back of her neck and stayed there. None of them spoke again for a long time. Outside, the sky over Long Island began, very slowly, to turn the color of pearl. And that is where this story lays down its head, friends, because the truth of what happened in that study 3 months earlier was never about a bottle of pills or $1,000 blanket or a moonstone on a leather cord. The truth was this. A little boy with a hole in his heart asked a dangerous man, "Mister, does your chest hurt?" And in asking, he showed that man what no amount of money, no amount of power, no amount of fear had ever been able to show him. That underneath every wall a wounded person builds, there is still a human being waiting to be asked how they are. A child could see that when grown men could not. The lesson our story wants to leave with you tonight is a quiet one. We do not know, most of the time, what weight the person in front of us is carrying. The rude stranger at the counter, the boss who never smiles, the neighbor who locks his door twice. Before we decide who they are, maybe, the way Ethan did, we can ask the smaller question first. Are you okay? Are you hurting somewhere? Kindness is not weakness. Kindness is the only language strong enough to reach a person who has forgotten how to be reached. And forgiveness is not something we give to people who deserve it. It is something we give because carrying the opposite will break our own backs in the end. Now, we would love to hear from you. Did this story touch something in you tonight? Is there a Dominic in your own life? Someone who seems cold, closed off, hard, who maybe, just maybe, is only hurting and waiting for somebody to notice? Or are you a Clara, a single parent holding the whole world together on tired shoulders? And tonight you needed to hear that your goodness matters. Write us a few words in the comments below. Tell us your story. We read everyone. and somebody out there tonight needs to hear what you have to say. If this video moved your heart, please do us a small kindness in return. Tap the like button, share the story with someone you love, and subscribe to our channel so we can meet here again tomorrow night with another story, another life, another lesson, another chance to feel something real together. To everyone watching this, from our family to yours, we wish you a healthy body, a peaceful mind, and a life full of the small everyday joys that make a home a home. Take care of the people around you. Ask them if their chest hurts. You never know whose life you might change with a single question. Goodbye for now, friends, and we will see you in the next video.